Hey, welcome to another episode of Strive 365, your go-to source for conquering life's challenges and thriving no matter the odds. Whether you're seeking a mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual growth, we're here to help guide you towards a better life. I am your host, Justen Arnold, in the amazing Roc Vox studio. And it's been a few months since I put out an episode. Reason being, one, it was getting warmer. Two, I have been reeling in challenges that I needed to just take my time away from things. I needed to work on myself, my family, my professional life, my personal life. And I thought it was best for everything involved that I was been doing. And I might have my hands in a lot, for those that know, from coaching and things of that nature, that I think it was time to just put pause, limit the distractions, limit the stimulations, limit the things that I was doing. And, you know, you've heard the statement, less is more. And that's what it's been. And it's been a roller coaster ride, but it's been great. But I decided to come back in the studio here because I wanted to provide what I've been doing. I know a lot of you out there deal with a lot. And most people don't know what you're working through, dealing with, and mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever it may be. And you don't have things to lean on, or you don't have tools, or you're at loss, or worst case scenario, you know, you find yourself with vices, whatever those might be, whether it might be porn, drugs, alcohol, infidelity, things of that nature, maybe suicidal thoughts. And you know, this is Strive 365. We talk a lot about health, and we've had a ton of episodes on all kinds of things that, you know, from food, nutrition, movement, all that. But I thought it was time to do this, especially with some of the things like, you know, my book came out in March, but some of the challenges there, I finally just had my paperback come out. So, you know, it's going to be a solo episode. Scott, the producer, might chime in. I've had everything from, you know, closing my gym a couple weeks ago, which we'll talk about, to personal challenges that we'll get into a little bit, the book challenges, and just a lot of the things that have compounded in my life, and how I've been able to still find joy, which really was a hard process, to still wake up every day, live for life, work on self, the tools that I've been able to use, the lessons I've learned during this, and some other reflective questions. This is probably going to be shorter than normal, but I wanted, again, to come on here and have this conversation. And feel free to, if you do listen to this, I would love to hear how it may have helped you and impacted you. Again, this isn't some kind of like trauma sharing or woe is me story. This is, here's my stuff. Here's what I've learned and benefited from these experiences, and possibly how they can help you strive. So let's start out with closing the gym. So I closed the gym a couple weeks ago, but in all honesty, since last year and a half, I've been navigating, you know, being an author and coaching different sports and other things. There's also a new owner in my building that took over. My rent went up 20%. And found myself in other challenges. Trainers were dropping out. Most of my clients were turning online. So I was like getting to the point, do I even need a facility? And so, I mean, some of the biggest challenges is like I've been a business owner for over a decade. I've had that space for 8 years. So my youngest daughter's 8. She got really emotional, probably more than I did, because she's like, I've been here since I was born, and she was really sad about it, and she was still brought it up, and she's like, if we bring it up, she gets super emotional because she literally grew up in that place, and I was holding on to something I really didn't need. But it's like, if anybody can relate, you know, sometimes when you start something or you work somewhere, you work hard at something, it becomes a part of you, and it became so much a part of me that it was like a child. And I realized I didn't need it for a while, but it was like, man, what do I do? What's the next phase? What's the next step? And it literally came to force in my hand, where eventually my landlord sent me a letter, you know, they're not renewing leases, and that I literally had about less than a week to get all my stuff out of there. They would seize it. And I was like, whoa. And, you know, obviously some of my friends who were lawyers, like, you can go at it with this, you can go at it with that. But I'm like, I don't know if I have that time, and I don't know how serious this is. And I was like, you know what? it's time. I've been looking for a reason. And I found it. And so got a bunch of friends together. Thank God for that, man. I got great people and those who helped me out. And one day, so I had about a little over 2,000 square foot space. And one day, and literally we started about 7:30 a.m. and went till about 3. I was able to get everything out or sold. And now I've created an amazing home gym. And I'm already starting to train some clients there. Self-promotion there. I can on my show. And then what's cool is this is what's so cool when you close the door and more open. I've had several people already reach out to do online training, virtual training. Specifically, they want somebody that's not in their state, which is, wow, pretty cool stuff that's happening there. I also started working at a place called Next Level, which does a lot of local athletic training, working with hockey teams, some of the adult groups, some semi and professional athletes, which has been really neat. And it's attached to an ice rink, which those that don't know, I have 2 kids that skate. They're going to be skating at this rink. The team they're on, I am skating at this rink. So it's like it's a twofer. So it's been a pretty neat experience there. And a lot of other good things have come out of it, but it literally took that. And it reminds me a lot of my other stories, which I'll bring up another fitness. Before I started my business, I still had one foot in the Y because I was scared. I was honestly scared. And I've talked about this story, so I'll keep this one short, talk about this story on this podcast. But as soon as I pulled that foot out of the Y, my business blew up. And so I'm hopeful that this will have that turn as well. So, what's cool is how the support. I think, sometimes when we're shutting one door, especially when it's a business or moving or closing, there's that, at least with me, what will people think? Oh my God, am I a failure? Am I giving up? And, sometimes it's just a transition. And as long as you continue to work and keep your head up and head strong, it's amazing, you'll have the support you'll get. And it's been incredible. And what's been cool is how, now I have less bills. My insurance went down, and I don't have this second mortgage I'm paying on a facility, and I'm able to gratefully train online and out of my house, which is pretty cool that I have a basin that I could do that. So anywho, so my book too is another challenge. So the digital copy came out in March. And what's funny is when I published my first book, Scott, everybody wanted digital. I wasn't getting a whole lot of paperback. With this one, as soon as it came out, I want paperback. I'm like, and here I have a hiccup with the whole paperback situation. And part of it was the word count and I made a lot of, the word count was more than me and the publishing company agreed on. So working through that. And then also I made a lot of changes after it was printed, more than most. And it wasn't massive changes, but I deleted some sections. I added some sections. I reworded entire sections because it wasn't getting, but not that I wanted a perfect product, but after you read something, it makes you cringe. And it's you want to put out a good first draft essentially. And so because of all that, we were able to release the digital, but then there was a lot of adjustments that cost time and money, for the paperback, which was different. So by the time all that got said and done, months, and I'm like, man, is this paperback ever going to get out? And finally, it came out last week. Yay. So you can get your paperback on Amazon right now. And, I love this. It's definitely more of a guidebook. It's The Joyful Warrior. But, it makes sense, right? The book is literally about overcoming adversity through the storms of your life. And of course, the book would have its own. I don't know if I've told this on here, but I'll say it again. Literally when I hit send on my first draft to send to the publisher, the sky was sunny, but as soon as I hit send on the computer, this massive windstorm and hailstorm came outside. And I'm like, this is ironic, right? And even just the challenges during this book process of writing, the first one it wasn't easy, but it seemed easy compared to this one. It took a lot longer. The first book took 10 months. This took over a year. The amount of changes and things that went on with it and so forth with it. So many people ask me why write a second? What inspired you with it? Well, I wasn't going to even write a first, but I wasn't going to write a second, but I still had a lot more material to cover. But it was, again, similar to the first where, people had read the first and they loved it and they agreed with the purpose behind the pain. A lot of people never thought about that, which we'll get into this. But also it was man, I still struggle with joy through the hard times and the pain. And so like this past year and a half, I've had a lot of pain, a lot of challenges, and I've really had to like, man, this has probably been one of the hardest seasons of my life. And I've had some challenging seasons, especially in my youth. And it literally comes to like, when it seems so hard to create joy, like I really had to. So, that was the purpose of it. That the fact that I realized how hard it is for people to find joy, create joy, have happiness, those things every day, but also like when it gets really, really, and I'm talking hard. I'm talking where you're on your knees in the shower crying, which I've done, or you want to give up, or you barely want to get out of bed. But you do those things. And as you start to compound little things, little steps, things do get better. So that would have inspired me. And I wanted to provide all those tips because I've been through a lot of storms through my life. And man, the reception of even just the digital has been great. So that was it. And that's basically the key themes and the key ideas are behind the book. Like, it's definitely more of like a textbook type study guide, and there's informations and tips, there's stories, it's a different read than my first book in that, like you can go to different sections and take notes in each chapter and refer back to, and like you can bounce around if you want to, if there's something more pertaining to you and things of that nature, which is really cool. But it's how do we navigate this life? I've learned that through my life that the best things come through the hardest times, but you got to be willing to put in the work. You got to really be able to manage during the low points. They're going to come, not everything, as I've said before, is rainbows and unicorns. And it's one of the hard things in life. It doesn't mean like life sucks. I hear that said a lot. I don't think life sucks. I think life can be great. But it can be great when you know how to manage the hard, because for some people, hard is every day, every week. I also say if you're not having hardship, like business owners out there, if it's not hard, then you're probably not moving the needle in your business. So when you start to do things and challenge things and take chances, it's really hard and it's really stressful, and maybe you have some sleepless nights. But the joy comes when you get through those times, right? Like, and when you can manage joy through those times as well, you can get more stuff done instead of being in your feelings and your emotions and staying in bed. But it's really, really hard. And there's a lot of things through it. So I provide all that in that book.
You know what I have to say about joy?
Say it.
Just sort of butting in on your show here. But I've heard this a lot from people, and it's, a lot of people are looking for joy. They're looking for happiness. They're looking for those things in something else. Like, oh, if I made more money, I'd have more happiness and more joy. If I had a boat, or if I had a better house, or whatever. And that the joy comes from within.
Yeah.
That the happiness comes from within. That you have to be good with yourself. And sometimes it takes effort to get there, and there's steps that you have to overcome, right?
Yeah, and I would say that you pretty much explain in a neat way the difference between joy and happiness. So many people that I've talked to think they're one and the same, and they're not.
Yeah.
Happiness is like you just talked about, you can go find happiness. You can go to a birthday party, you can go hang out with friends. You could, whatever makes you happy, play a sport, get on a boat. Those things are happy. Could they provide joy? Depends. What if, the joy comes within. What if you're having a bad day and you're at the most fun theme park that you've loved, but you're not feeling it? But you could make the conscious choice, especially when it's hard, in here. And for me, or for anybody of a spiritual nature, for me, it's God. But even not just from within, but from above, or whatever it is that you might believe in, that something deeper is what I'm getting at. It's got to be a renewing of the mind, almost a renewing of your thoughts if they're in a place of scarcity or depression or resentment or bitterness, all these things. And I could list a ton of other words like that, but hopefully you know where I'm going. It's like if you're living in there, it becomes so much a part of you. And I'm telling my own story. Like those words that I just used have been in my mind, have been in my place, and I've had to rewrite and reword and reframe all the re's every single day of my life, I would say. Some days you probably don't even notice you're doing that. But like I would say the last 3 or 4 months, it's been an overdrive. And it's literally now, those are part of my tools of like, I by the way, I've written so many poems. I might come up with a poetry book next for those, and so many like short stories. And
is that your outlet? Is that like your creative way of dealing with things?
It is writing? Now. Like, I mean, for those that know, have been following me for a while. Like my first book, I said I would never write because I couldn't write, and like here I am, like, like I'm like, whether these things get published, but anybody listening out there, know I've got a poop ton of material. Like tons, not in a notebook. Don't worry. It's all on my iPhone notepad or my MacBook. So as long as that doesn't get lost, it's there. But we're talking like, I mean, I haven't written the Bible of sorts, but it's a lot. I mean, what's been cool is the poems is probably most exciting because I wrote some poems in my Joyful Warrior. That was probably more for me, but also like, to explain, that's one of the outlets. I think writing is one of the most therapeutic things you can do. I literally tell my kids, I told my daughter the other day, she was dealing with some struggles. I was like, you need to write it out, because if it stays up here is what I said to her, it's only going to manifest, it's going to build, and it's only become so much part of your story that becomes you. And if you don't get it out to a person, if that's not comfortable for you, you got to get it out on paper at least. And then I would encourage you to read whatever that is out loud. And then if you realize whatever you wrote, if you write continually negative stuff, like Tool, one of my favorite bands as a kid. But like if you could continually write that, it will become a part of you. But it's like you also have to read that, look at it a different perspective possibly. If it's in a negative, like how can we flip this around and see it in a growth, a positive or whatever. But yeah, sometimes it can be, and I have no problem with it. Like one of the things, without giving too much detail, one of the poems I wrote was about the devil in my life. And like how he was getting in my thoughts and in my mind, and writing that out helped like release those pieces in a lot of ways. It was a very angry, like that was like a very angry, like teenage-esque, but it's like definitely one I'll definitely put in a poetry book if I do put it out. But yeah, writing is one of those tools that I've been using regularly, which has been helpful. I've shared it with some people, which has been helpful. But that's been one of the other tools is like, you do need people in your life, but find a small group that's going to support you no matter what you decide, what your decisions are. Like, for example, if you're going through financial challenges or relationship challenges or a health challenge of some sort. For example, my grandma, she's passed away now. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she had an opportunity to have surgery, but she's like, I lived a good life. My mom was so against it, fighting her, go do whatever, chemo, surgery, whatever was available. She refused. It wasn't that she was giving up on life, but she wanted to go the way she wanted to go. Similar, like, some people are going to make decisions that you don't agree with. And I'm not saying don't have those people, but like I have we're talking like 4 people, 4 good men in my life that I talk to at least weekly. And they're all men that don't tell me what to do, but maybe give me some helpful advice, but know that it's ultimately my choice. They like, well, this is that perspective. You could do this. This could mean this. You know what I mean? Like, and giving me thoughts around it and challenging me for sure. Not trying to say, oh, you're right, Justin. Not agreeing with me all the time either. And when you find those are real friends. Those are good people that if you don't have those, you can go out and search. But also, like what I did, how did I find these? I prayed on these people. Whatever that looks like, if you're not a praying person, but that's what I did. Meditate on it if that's your thing. Like you gotta be deep enough in your thoughts. And for people that are dealing with heavy thoughts, it's hard. But when you can get through them and breathe through them and find like love and peace and calmness and safety in those thoughts, your brain can usually, at least for me, been able to navigate a direction, an idea, a person, a way to go through. And so I posted actually about that a month ago. Like something I've been saying and meditating in my cold plunge almost daily is like, I am safe. I am loved. I am calm. And I mean, and sometimes I'm like, no, I'm not. But if I say it enough, I really start to feel that way. And I talk about this in my book as well. So yeah, some of the personal life challenges. So yeah, so I wrote some notes just to keep me on task because I have ADHD, so I go crazy. But some of my personal life challenge, ADHD. No, but so these things have affected me mentally, emotionally, even like my spiritual growth. But so some things going on in my personal life that I don't want to dive too deep into here, as far as because it deals with other people and that it's my perspective. But just know that there's like personal things within close relationships in my life that have been challenged more than ever, and it's getting me to my lowest moments and broken me down. But with that said, it's also what it's done is it put a mirror back on me and realize, oh my God, I can sit here and have bitterness, have resentment, have hate, have anger. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but you can't stay there. That's not healthy. But it's gotten me an opportunity to look in a mirror and realize I still have a lot of work to do on myself. I'm not maybe this health guru guy that people put a title on that I don't think that I don't agree with necessarily, but I have a lot of people reach out to me, ask me for advice for all kinds of things. Prayer, nutrition, food, health. How do you stay so positive and in shape and all these things? How do you write? All this stuff. But that doesn't mean I don't have my challenges too. And that's why I'm just this open guy. I'm going to come on here and be like, look, I'm a real human who has real life problems and I have tools that I use. And so I've dealt with some of these and it's been hard. But it's also been one of the, I have a chapter in my book called Winning or Growing. And I've been winning a lot for the last decade in my life, really well. And so I guess that was due time for some massive growth. It sucks that so much came at me at once, but it's also when you take the time to realize the benefits in the storms, which is what I'm going through, you can start to see the growth that is needed in yourself. Because, right, we can consider ourselves masterpieces, but we might have a lot of great qualities, and we should see that we have gifts to give this world, because we all do, right? But we're also works in progress. And that's a line I paraphrase from my book, that we're all masterpieces in progress. And sometimes it takes getting kicked down, beat down, but we have to look at that reflection in the mirror, because sometimes the things that are happening to us are for good reason. And it's because of maybe we've fallen short in an area. Maybe we've fallen short in the way we treated people. Yeah, maybe we're really good, but maybe there are things that we weren't doing as well as we thought. And maybe sometimes we're upset at these people in our life. Maybe they did something to hurt you, but also, is it just about you? Maybe they hurt you because you hurt them. Did you take a moment to look at maybe some of the things you did to them? Or you just in your own, I'm going to say this for myself. I've been selfish in my feelings. What about me? What about my feelings? What about my emotions? And not to say those aren't important, but if you really care about somebody, you need to also look at theirs. And so this is deep in my relationship with myself, my spiritual life. For those in the spiritual realm, there's layers and levels to everything, right? We might be deep into it. So since I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, there was a time where I didn't believe in this stuff. And so I'm at this point where I'm doing way better than I was. I can compare all day to my past self. But again, there's layers and levels. Am I really as deep in my relationships as I can with Jesus? Am I really as deep in my faith? Am I really as knowledgeable? No, because I don't really if I'm truly deep and then I trust him, I have hope in everything, that all these things that are happening may not be, are happening. I don't want to use for a reason, but they're happening and there's opportunity in it. And we need to see that opportunity within those challenging moments in our life. And so it doesn't mean you want to have some kick down, drag out days where you just want to give up and quit. But even through all this, you know what I've done? I've still meditated. I've still journaled. I still ran. I think I'm close to 600 days of running straight. And once I did these things, I started to at least feel better. It was easier when doing movement. I talk about it all the day. I'm eating healthy. I'm not drinking. I'm having a cocktail every so often, but I don't have vices where I'm I have to drink, or definitely not drugs or anything of that nature. So it's somebody said to me, man, that one of the 4 men I talked about, he said, he realizes you're going through a lot, and I'm blown away at how disciplined you are, and how, like, because he was saying, like, when he's gone through similar stuff, like, he goes to certain vices like porn and alcohol, and I think it's because I realize how much I don't have control over except for my mind. And I know that, like, when I'm taking care of myself, my physical, mental, and emotional and nutritional health and all these things, that, like, it's easier to navigate those things that are completely out of my control. And so I don't want to give what I'll call the devil more control by weakening my mind, by weakening my gut, by weakening myself. It's not easy, but, like, it's more like, you know, I can control so little. So do I want to give up more control of myself, or do I want to start taking control? And Scott said it earlier, it's all comes from within. So how does it come from within if you're letting the within, like, go, if you're letting all these other things? Because we know that when we're inebriated or when we're addicted to anything, again, porn, drugs, whatever, like social media, they're distractions from really getting to your deep self. Like, I'm not to really finding that deep joy, because we've literally gotten to the point where we're using all these other things to distract from things up here. And it just becomes an utter breakdown, and it makes us weaker to be able to find that joy in the storms, to be able to navigate those challenges in our personal life, to really have some kind of strategy. Like, for example, if you're under any kind of, like, distractive influence, if you're overstimulated, even just from a technology standpoint, you're probably working at a rapid pace already. Like what's I'm looking for? Like like everything's an emergency. I see it in people. I've been there. And so, like, say there's a conflict in your home or with a friend, instead of taking the time to listen to their words and maybe not say a damn thing, you want to fire off because you feel backed in the wall because you're working in that, you know, in that state. And while it's hard, for example, when there's conflict, some of the people on the other side of that conflict want you to say something, and they'll create more. And sometimes, but I want you to know it's okay just to be like, hey, I want to think about what you said, and I want to come back to this. And they might get pissed off at that, because I've been in these situations, but know that it can be for the better. Don't feel like you have to say something. Like, you know, in the Bible, it says you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, but people know this too. You don't need to read that to understand that. And there's a reason for that. Sometimes we just need to listen, go meditate on it. And if people aren't okay with that, don't be controlled by that. Don't be controlled by them. Remember, you're working on yourself. And if you want to be show up for the best person of yourself, your kids, your wife, whoever it might be, then you also need to give boundaries to your own self. And that could be one of them. Boundaries is a key thing that I've been managing through these last 3 months. Even with, everyone knows I'm an active father. I love my kids, but sometimes I'm like kids. They want to go play. They want to play catch. They want to do these things. But sometimes I need a break, and I need to just go lay on a Shakti mat. I need to go meditate. These are some of my tools. I need to go jump in a cold plunge. I need to take a nap. I need to go for a run, because those are part of being able to maximize ourself, to work on ourself. Do you have any thoughts or questions on that, Scott? Or anything you want to ask me?
I wanted to go back to something you said about, you said winning and growth, right? Winning and growing, and the difference between that. So you were winning and winning and winning, but you weren't growing. Is that what I understand?
No. So, like, winning, I was growing. So it's like winning and growing. You can grow and win at the same time. I'm not saying that, but, like, instead of saying like winning or losing, like, instead of saying, like,
I see.
Like I coach baseball, I coach hockey, and I say some of the best lessons are learned when you lose.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, because I was wondering about that, because I'm like, all right, because sometimes it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell when you're winning. You know, sometimes you don't know you're winning until you look back on it and you say, oh, wow, I was actually winning. That was actually good. That was actually positive. You know, at the time, it might be pain. It might be, a challenge that you're like, I was just bad. Everything was bad. Everything was bad. But then when you came out of it, you realized that you learned something. And so in retrospect, you won. You know what I mean? But at the time, you didn't think you were winning.
Like, yeah. Like, as kids, I mean, I've talked about my life, but my whole childhood was in, like, death and destruction and trauma. Like, I had good moments. And I would say, for the most part, if we had to compare most people's, not all, childhood with their adulthood, people would pick childhood all day, I would assume, because like it's fun, it's easy, it's playful, you don't have to build, like all the things, right? Like, oh, I wish I could go back being a kid again is a statement often made. And that's why we need to prepare our kids. It doesn't mean give them a tough life, but like make decisions, overcome adversity, try out for sports, like, and fail and whatever it might look like, because I know everybody's adulthood. We all got our own lives we're living, but any adult that hasn't had a hard time, I'm like, you're lying. Like, because it's like, we're all having hard lives. I think even post-COVID, I mean, especially like, I'm not going to bring up politics per se, but like even just the political climate right now and like how people have lost friends. Even over COVID, people lost friends because of how they felt about vaccinations versus not getting vaccinated. And it's just amazing like what that is. And I've always been a believer that we're all human. Like, we're all just human beings. And, I don't expect us all to get along and sing Kumbaya and be best friends. But it's like, if we start to just have more empathy in this world around people and understand they're all going through their stuff.
Yep.
And I think that's like, if anything through this, like I've always been that kind of guy. If anybody knows me, like I'm just like, I make mistakes and I mess up and I sin here and there. But it's just like, I've always had empathy and understood like, and if it's only grown, and I think that's the one thing, like if you've been through hard stuff and you haven't learned empathy through that, then that's one of the biggest lessons you could learn. And I think like hurt people is a common phrase because it happens so much. It's happening to me currently. Like, and so in those moments when somebody's screaming at you or yelling at you or trying to fight you, I play hockey, so there you go. Like, so it's like when you start to have empathy, it's like you almost start to be like, man, what's going on in their life? Like, so you start to be a little more concerned and you can usually bring that down. You can bring that conflict down by being more understanding, but what happens in heated situations? We feel backed in a ball. Feel backed in a wall in a corner and we want to fight our way out. That's very primal. Right? Like, why do we lie? Why do we fight back? Why do we, when somebody's coming at our face, we're going right back at them.
Here's a quote that I just heard that I think is perfect for this conversation. When you feel an intense emotion, that's your cue to pause. It's not your cue to react immediately or angrily or with a sharp tongue. The most successful people have trained themselves not to react to their emotions. Remember to pause.
Yeah, and that's what I was.
And when
getting
you pause,
at earlier,
you can say, "All right, so why did Justin just yell at me?" He didn't really just yell at me. I'm just giving an example. Why did Justin just yell at me? Let me think about it a second. And then instead of reacting with shouting back, I say, "Whoa, Justin, what's going on, man? You okay? Is everything cool? Like what? How come?"
That's empathy, right?
Right. And usually you wouldn't yell at me, but you're yelling at me now. So I want to know what's going on.
But when we live in a place of fear, scarcity, even if we're the ones that messed up, like we're going to start yelling back. And I forget the guy who said it, but he said something along the lines of nobody wins in a fight, like an argument. Nobody wins. And even if you feel you win or you're on top or you have control or the person walked away or whatever, like nobody really truly wins. It's even if you have empathy, you're not winning. The point is, it's like to have that empathy, to have that care, like you just said, it's hard, but that's what makes us human, right? Like we are still very much primal. And so we need to recognize that, like we need to get out of that. If we're the most advanced creature, animal on this planet, let's start acting like it.
Oh yeah. Dale Carnegie, you can't win an argument. That's. I think that was in How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a book that I read a long time ago, but I forget.
It's still on my bookshelf. Though, yeah.
I have to read it again because it's probably been about 20 years since I read that book, but he's got a lot of great tidbits in there.
I would say that's the over-encompassing thing of anything, like with relationships, with any challenge in your life. Like when you can stop and pause, like that's one of my biggest tips too around all of this, around life, around challenges. Like around being busy, if you like, I do the Pomodoro effect when I get into some heavy work, which is 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. I have Took me forever. I was like, I've always been an efficient machine, but I would just keep going until like I basically fell on the floor. But like I found that I can be so much more productive in a shorter period of time when I take a walk or when I meditate or pause.
Go back to what you just said, the Pomodoro effect?
Yeah, it's like 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. This has been showing if you're doing like computer work or even just reading a book, you're going to retain and get more stuff done. So like one of the things I'll do is like an hour, 2 hour block. So I'll do a 2 hour block of 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And the 5 minutes needs to be off. I mean, maybe it's getting a bite to eat out of the fridge, but like leave the technology, leave the stimulating stuff, maybe go for a 5 minute walk. And you can create your own. It could be 20-10. You can create your own little interval. But it's incredible because it's like, especially like when you have that short window, like for example, when I'm writing, but here's the thing, like if you're writing, for example, a book or whatever, let's not be all about grammar, run on sentence, just like write. And because you can go back and look at that stuff, right? Just write. Oh, 25 is up and just get up. Even if you're in the middle of a thought, unless it's like a super important, I mean, you got to have some flex, right? Like I got to finish this sentence and then you can start the 5. So it's not like I'm saying you can't go to 26. In some cases you need some flex, but like for the most part, pause, get up, do something. And like even in these arguments too, it's like, you know, hey, that's been one of the harder things for me. That's why I'm saying it's probably one of the most beneficial because, you know, when I've gotten in conflicts with people that are important to me, and I mean, they might look at like, no, we're going to finish this now. Don't let them control you in those situations. Even if it feels like, oh my God, they'll leave me or they won't think I love them. Like I'm saying this because that's stuff I said in my head. And I'm like, you know what? If I really love them and if I really care about them, then I'm going to walk away and think about it because firing something off right now will only make things worse. Right? And that's going to, and then you lose anyway. So at least if you walk away or you just pause even and think, and you let them know, I need to think about this before I just fire off a response. They might want you to just to get a reaction, but sometimes you just need to pause, walk away, think about it. Eventually, I believe most normal, there's no normal, right? Most human beings with a conscience and a heart will understand, even if they're pissed off as at hell at you. So I've had great success with that. And maybe it's coming back into the next day. And also some things are left unsaid sometimes. Do you need to say everything? Do you need to write everything and send them an email or a letter or text? That's the other thing. Forms of like how you communicate. Maybe you got to, know the area, but like sometimes the face-to-face or a phone call or FaceTime with conflict with people, I have found as hard as it is sometimes the best. But if it starts to get heated, you need to put a pause on it. Because also with text and email, you don't know if they're opening them up or reading them or not. And if there's a point you really want to get across, so manage that. If it's one of those things like you don't care if they open it, but you're just going to send it to them anyways for yourself, yeah, so be it. But that's why taking notes, writing things down, and depending on where your relationship's at, man, like I encourage everyone to like, especially if it's like a marriage, definitely like if there's challenges here, like, don't give up. Like go to therapy, go to counseling, maybe for yourself, maybe for them. I've read enough books over the years of marriages specifically where like if the kids, other than an abusive or like, toxic, like alcoholic, traumatic, or like drug, like an addictive environment, outside those kinds of things, the kids always turn out better in a lot of different aspects, which sounds crazy. But I even been reading this book called Sacred Marriage recently. It's been amazing. I encourage a lot of people to read it. Larry says marriage doesn't usually start till 10 years, 14 years in. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it talks about like for the most part, you really don't know who you're with. And then as you get older and things get challenging, and especially when you have kids, it's like you really get to know who this person is. And you have an opportunity there through these hard times to dig in and like as men, I'm going to say, suck it up. And like, maybe you weren't doing your best. Maybe you thought you were doing good, but maybe you could have been doing better. Maybe there were things you were missing. Same things for women, like it's you're two different people, two different genders. There's that book, like Women are from Mars, Men are from Venus, or whatever. I don't know what planets. You're from different planets. And I would agree to that in that. And that's what makes it hard, but that's what makes it great. Think about like, if you can manage somebody like that. I mean, our divorce rate is getting way out of hand. What is it, like 60% now? And it just shows like nobody wants to deal with the hard stuff, the conflict. But that's where like, if you talk to anybody who's been married like past like 30 years, I just talked to somebody yesterday. They told me how hard it got in the middle, like those years that I was just talking about, but like how grateful they are that they worked through it and how much better both their lives are and how much better communicators and like how it didn't just better their lives in their marriage and with their kids, like it spider webbed out. Isn't that amazing, right? Because like everyone's going to deal with difficult people. What if you're dealing with the most difficult person that you love, but like you're angry at right now, but you can find a way to work through that. And I'll tell you this, maybe only one person's working and we can get all bitter and hateful and resentful about it, but maybe that's what it's going to take to make the difference. And maybe you won't stay together and that's fine too. But like for that, it needs to be like, you can't, that's what we're talking about giving up. Like you got to put in the work, especially when it's hard. But again, even through that, it's got to be about working on yourself, finding the joy every day, creating that joy every day, knowing that being a little selfish is selfless, and creating that a beautiful environment. And if anything, look at what your kids are learning. Your kids are learning something in an environment like that where there's conflict. Because what married couple doesn't fight, right? And if they can see two parents there's conflict and overcoming that and then loving each other, whatever the time frame might be, a day, a week, a month, a year. I mean, I just talked to a friend who they were separated all last year. Like they weren't even living together. You're like, oh, it's over, right? They're back together and they're loving each other like never before. And he says, this is the best our marriage has ever been. So if there's hope right there, that's amazing, right? So you gotta believe, these things are possible in your personal life. And so, I mean, we've talked a lot about how we've done that, right? We've talked about, working on ourselves a lot, how we do that. And you need to find out what that looks like. But I'm going to say it over and over again, health. Like if you're not working on your health and then you're blaming somebody else or you're blaming your finances, your personal life, whatever is like not good in your life right now, take a look in the mirror. Like, we could sit here and yell at our boss. We could sit here and blame the economy. We could blame the president. But that gets us nowhere and moves us nowhere. And so we need to take a look back at ourselves. And there's always something. And look at that as opportunity to really dig in and dig deep to be able to work on those areas. So yeah, those are part of my practices. That's I've been able to stay in it and keep moving in my life. I'm not out of the woods yet, but I know that each day gets a little bit better. If anything, man, so here's one thing, I'll put it this way. So I've done CrossFit and so I beat my body up. I've been working out my whole life. I've done some of the hardest workouts and that was all physical, right? And I feel like I'm going through a season where it's like CrossFit for the mind. And I'm like, if I can do that to my body day in, day out, I can have the discipline and mindset to do this for my mind. And reframing, rewriting narratives, like doing whatever it takes to build that mind muscle to withstand anything, to be able to have challenging situations in my life and be able to, instead of like sitting in my emotions and feelings, to have them, but navigate to the point of, okay, this is what I'm learning from this. This is what I need for this. Okay, let's get up. Maybe it starts with just, hey, I got up out of bed. I've got maybe it's a quote, maybe it's a scripture next to your bed, reading that. And then maybe it's just going for a walk. Like just keep doing these things. So, and then be in those thoughts. Like I really don't put headphones on. This doesn't count. I really don't put headphones on when I'm working out or doing any of these things, which has been so hard. And I talk about that as I have a chapter in my book called Comfort Through Discomfort. And one of the later ads, because I talked about some of the obvious maybe, but one of the later ads was the mind. And for somebody like me who's been through what I've been through, the ADHD, it's like I've always had noise. I mean, I was the guy that listened to TV when I was sleeping. I always had headphones in, music playing. Quiet could be so uncomfortable. But nowadays I embrace the discomfort of the quiet so I can navigate through my thoughts and come to resolutions, like I said earlier, so that I can find the people I need to connect with, say the words I need to say, do the things I need to do for myself and for others to make a difference. Be as present and optimal in wherever I need to show up in my life. When you're going through stressful times, you do get in your feelings maybe a little bit. So like when somebody's talking, you may be distracted thinking, if you're angry, thinking about whatever is bothering you. If you're angry at that person, maybe you're thinking of the reason you're angry with them instead of trying to build up that relationship. Again, something I've had to struggle through and work through. And now I'm to a point where like, if those thoughts do come in my mind, I'm still focused on their lips moving, on the words coming out of their mouth, and removing the negativity and resentment or whatever it might be, the anger, and being intentional about their words, and try not to overcomplicate those words, just listening to their words and maybe thinking empathy or thinking in their perspective of what they're trying to say and what they're trying to mean. So I'd like you guys to reflect on some things after this, like what challenges are you currently facing and how are you dealing with them? I would love to hear from you guys from this. How can you reframe difficult situations to find positive outcomes? I've talked about that on here. I'll give another example. Say, reframing from a financial, like, man, the economy, or I'm poor, or like, gosh, nothing's going good for me. And like saying, hey, let's reframe that to, let's write down the gratitude things. Hey, I got a bed. It sounds silly, but these things work. Hey, I got food in front of me. Hey, I got a loving family. Hey, why don't I pick up the phone and call somebody for a job interview or whatever it might be? Like, when my gym was being challenged in that situation, I was like frustrated and upset, but then called my buddy Nate, said, hey, if you need help, let me know. Like, I'll be out there anyways, working, coaching hockey. And what do you know? He's like, yeah, of course. I transition clients online. I made a post on social media, not for marketing, just tell people where I'm at, like update them. I was hard actually. Like, it's like, oh my God, are people going to think I'm a loser? I thought about that for a second, but I was like, you know what? Who cares? Like, if anything, I'm a real human just like anybody else. And this is what's going on. What's cool about that is the opportunity that's come out of that, and people have reached out, like I said earlier. So, put yourself out there. What are some ways you can support others in your community during these tough times? And that goes back to what Scott and I were talking about earlier about empathy. Like, be on the lookout for that, because that's a win-win relationship. I always feel like when you're empathetic, it's amazing how you just feel better, even when you're dealing with your stuff, and how things start to progressively get better. Your outlook, your perspective, and even like the actual opportunities in your life. Yeah. So I think that's where we're going to wrap it up here. And hopefully you guys got some things from this, from whatever you're dealing with, whatever challenges. If you'd love to hear more or talk more on this subject, I'd be down for it. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I know it was helpful for me. And I just want you to know that, like, I'm good and I'm doing really good. It wasn't always that way, but I was able to create joy every day. And now one of the things that I'll leave you with that I've been saying every day, besides the I am loved, I am safe, I am calm, is create joy. I'm saying that to myself, especially when like something might make me angry. I was like, create joy. And just by simply saying that, it's like, okay, let's try to create joy in this moment. Let's try to create joy in whatever's going on. And that gives you like a more positive outlook in those situations or whatever you're being challenged with, to be able to take action on that. And it sounds so simple, and maybe it sounds silly to all y'all, to some of you, but it's literally some of the things that have been working for me. Is just, again, I would say the hardest battles and the wars you're going to fight are up here. Most of you probably know that, but you got to reiterate it, and you got to be consistent. And sometimes you got to read things over and over again. Like the writing that I talked about earlier, some of those things have become mantras where I'm reading whenever I need them. So I have like a plethora of everything from Bible verses to quotes to things I just wrote, to even like reframing around people in my life that I had a very negative thought process or outlook for. I'm reading this, even if I don't always believe it, but it's starting to get to a point of reframing the mind to how I see that person or see that situation or see where I'm at, in my professional or personal life or spiritual life or my health. We got to speak kind words to ourselves. We've got to speak kind words in our mind. And we actually have to speak kind words to others, especially when it's hard. Because that's where it can just become so much a part of you that we can just go out and be that loving and empathetic person. Doesn't mean we have to be best friends. We're not talking about again, sing Kumbaya and hippy dippy. We're all sitting around a circle. That's not going to happen. Let's be realistic. But your health, especially your mental health, can be better with that because it'll get rid of a lot of the negativity around yourself, around others, around the worry, around the anxiety, around the fear, around the things, like I said, bitterness and resentment, and any of those emotions that you're dealing with that aren't doing you any favors. They aren't doing you any good. They're only bringing you down, and they'll bring down people with you. And again, it's going to be a constant battle till you're, probably off this planet. So just remember, find some of the tools that we used here, find your own. And if they're working to create that joy every day, then stick with them and have them close by where if you need to pull them up in a moment's notice. That's why I put them on my phone. Because there's moments where I'm I want to punch a steering wheel and lose my temper. And I take a breath, I pause, as Scott said, and then maybe I'll pull over and I'll read what I need to read and say what I need to say. And maybe I need to say it 10 times. And voila, what do you know? That's the magic trick to getting back on the road or getting back focused on what I need to. So there we go. I'm not sure what we title this podcast, but I feel like we talked about a lot of good stuff here. And I hopefully, again, you guys found benefit. I appreciate y'all. I would love to, again, those questions that I asked earlier, I would love to hear what you guys think about that. And I would love to hear anybody else's story and how they're dealing with challenges in their life. If you want to be on this podcast and you think your story is worthwhile, I'd love to have you. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate every one of you because what's been crazy about my time off, I forgot to tell you this, Scott, the 3 months that I've been off or so, the analytics on this podcast have gone way up, and I've had people in public actually saying stuff, and it hasn't happened in the last year. So maybe, again, taking a pause and a breather and a break will do everyone some good, as I talked about. But even in your professional life, who knew by pausing and breaking from this podcast, then the podcast would start to really take off. I literally had somebody at hockey yesterday talking about it, and then they were talking about my son's episode and some of the other episode, and they had somebody reach out from Europe. It's been crazy. So anyway, I digress. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Look at I'm smiling. Take care. God bless.